Today, we've arrived in the Great Twelves Wood, also known as the Black Shroud to outsiders, a sacred forest that is home to the great city-state of Gridania and two different beast tribes, both of which are mischievous fey creatures, flying and floating through the air and playing many mischievous tricks on enemies and friends alike. Today we'll be talking about the race of flying plants, who also always skip leg day. Today we'll be looking at the Sylphs. The Sylphs. They claim the deepest depths of the Twelves Wood as their home, a beautiful and majestic zone full of wonder, covered in a strange purple haze, also inhabited by a innumerable number of poison-spewing fungi and very hungry and angry fauna and flora, most of which is either poisonous or venomous in some way. It's basically a forest-covered Australia. Such a magical and wonderful place. But yeah, to understand the Sylphs, we'll go over our usual questions. So let's begin. Their physical characteristics. The Sylphs are a very diminutive people who are more plant than anything else. Their entire body is covered in leaves and, like plants, they photosynthesize. Because of this, the Sylphs don't need to ingest anything besides water to survive. However, they definitely still eat food, but it's not an actual survival requirement and is more of just something they really enjoy doing, kinda like eating sweets and candies. The Sylphs also really know how to party. They often create a beverage made from squeezing sap from a plant called the milk root, which gets them incredibly drunk. It's basically vodka according to the law book, but going off of this fate's description and how the Sylphs act, maybe it's more like getting high on crack. Fun fact, this milk root sap can also be turned into a vapor, which is what these things are sometimes used for. So they can breathe in the milk root sap and become super drunk / high really quickly. Party hard, little plant. Now, looking at the size of the Sylph, I'm sure it'll surprise literally nobody that they're one of the weakest races around in terms of physical strength. With arms that you could pull out of their sockets with a firm handshake, and legs as thin as twigs that look like they'll snap in a strong breeze. The Sylphs also practically never use these legs, and remain airborne near their entire life, and prefer to float from place to place, using their wings as propulsion and using powerful magic to manipulate the aether around them to keep themselves airborne. Very powerful magic. The Sylphs are just naturals at spellcasting, and even have some signature spells that they are all able to innately cast, like their skin changing spell. But what do they do with this incredible inborn magic prowess? Do they use them to infiltrate enemy ranks and act as spies? Do they rain hell down upon their enemies from afar? Or do they use it mostly for practical jokes and causing mischief? Yeah, that one. And that's because of their culture. Oh, ha ha ha, I put a bunch of vegetables on your roof. Ha ha ha, I'm so funny. Oh, ha ha ha, I put marble bile in your tea. You know that stuff that makes people horrendously sick? You just drank it. Ha ha ha, I'm so funny. Oh, ha ha ha, I tricked you to follow me deep into the forest. I'm now gonna let you die and feed your corpse to a carnivorous plant. Ha ha ha, I'm so funny. By the way, I'm not joking here. Each of these is a prank the Sylphs have played. The TLDR of Sylph culture is, it's just a prank, bro, which is hallmarked in their leadership. The elder Sylph, who is just the oldest Sylph, fills the role of the mediator between the Sylphs and other races, but really holds no power and can't enforce any laws or rules, because the Sylphs have no laws or rules. They live in a sort of stable anarchy. Yes, you could go and talk to the elder about your grievances that Sylphs are causing you, and yes, you will listen, but all he'll do is tell you that,
We're sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry. Sorry.
Now, one would imagine that after a while, people would get really ticked off with the Sylphs and their constant prank pulling shenanigans, right? Well, they actually don't. And that's because of the second part of the Sylph culture. The Sylphs are incredibly curious and value being seen favorably by other races quite highly. So much so that they'll change their very culture on a whim to better relate to or to be able to engage with other races. They just really want to get along and be liked. The simp doormats. For example, when the Sylphs met the Hyur and Elazin who founded Gridania, they immediately dropped the use of their own ancestral language and only spoke the dominant Hyur. Even when there's no Hyur or Elazin around and they're just speaking among themselves, they would only speak Hyur. Because of this, their own language went extinct in a single generation. Fun fact though, yes, their language is gone, but some of their grammar rules do remain in how the Sylphs speak. Not using personal pronouns and referring to themselves as this one and some other descriptive term when referring to others, like walking one, adventuring one, badly glamoured one, or whatever other descriptive term they can think of. Another example of them trying to desperately get along with everyone is the Ash Crown Consortium, an organization that was sadly destroyed and disbanded with the fall of Dalamud. Long story short, it was created by the Sylphs to facilitate trade between all the races and beast tribes, helping them get along and trade instead of immediately kill each other. The Sylphs here, with their skills in adapting to new cultures, would act as the mediator for the trade, literally talking the language of each race to help them get along. But yeah, as mentioned, the Sylphs have unfortunately given up on that, and they started to close their hearts to outsiders. Then Garlemald invaded the Eastern Shroud, causing many of them, who were already becoming less friendly to others, to go to the extreme and summon their god. So what is their god? What's their religion? The Sylphs worship Ramua, Lord of Leven, a wise and benevolent god who holds ancient secrets and is the protector of the deep forest. His symbol is that of a bolt of lightning, because he uses lightning on people who would dare harm the forest. What a shocker. Now, interestingly, Ramua looks human, very human. Why is that? We'll look at the current dominant theory after we look at the self-creation myth. Many races would claim that they were the first sentient beings that came into existence. The Sylphs do not. They believe that the world and all other races existed long before they did. Their tale speaks of men as greedy, thoughtless creatures who brought destruction to the forest, destroying and ripping it apart for resources and land. Being unable to flee from the bite of steel or the lick of the flames, the very trees themselves cried out to the gods, any god, for help. It was then that Remua, a quote, deity of man, heard their desperate pleas. Remua sent his 11 bolts to strike budding fruits from ancient branches, and from these charred husks the Sylphs were born. Remua spoke with the Sylphs and blessed them with vast arcane knowledge and tasked them with serving as the forest's protectors. And presumably together they chased out those who would harm the forest. The story does just sort of end there. But ever since that day, the Sylphs have dwelled beneath the Black Shroud's canopies, keeping peace within the deep forest and defending it from all those who would do it harm. So clearly the Sylphs themselves say their god is a god of man. Remember, Sylphs do not care about their own history, so it wouldn't be surprising at all if they changed to believe in one of their neighbors' gods to better get along with them. And many scholars believe he is the god most revered by the Alamegans, Rolga the Destroyer, who also has command of lightning and also appears like a wise sage holding a staff. Though of course Remua being a Sylphic interpretation of him. But yeah, now we know the Sylphs' physical traits, their history and their culture and society. So let's wrap this up quickly with their naming conventions. But first, to understand their naming, we need to look at the two types of Sylphs, the late blooms and the everblooms. Everblooms are the Sylphs who always bloom at the correct time during their pollination season, whereas late blooms are exactly what the name implies. They bloom late and near always miss the pollination season. The pollination season being when they But wait, how do you tell who is a male and who is a female Sylph, I hear you ask? Well, my friend, you don't. Because Sylphs, like most plants, are hermaphrodites, having both male and female reproductive organs, and these organs are inside of their flower, which is on their head, meaning during their pollination season, the everblooms try to get head pregnant with a good skull by holding hands and singing Kumbaya. If they're successful, they'll grow one of these podlings on their head, later taking them and planting them inside the seed bed to incubate. And then they peace out because parenting isn't a thing for them. Everblooms, on the other hand, like most things that are involuntarily celibate, have great magical strength, proving once and for all, if you guard your virginity, you'd become a powerful wizard. So now that we know about the two types of Sylph, let's finally see how we identify them with their naming conventions. Everbloom Sylph names always end with the suffix xio, whereas late bloom Sylph names always end with the suffix xia. As for what goes before the suffix, there really is no rhyme, reason, or rule here. You can put anything here so long as it sounds right and ends with the correct suffix, such as delixia, delixio, Lazia, Lazio, Moxia, Moxio, and so on. Now for their last names, they don't exist. Sylphs do not care at all about familial relationships. After all, they were abandoned before they even flowered out of being a podling, so it's of no surprise that last names do not exist in their culture. They only go by their first name, maybe a title too if they have one. Now, if you're wondering why Eorzeans still use him or her when talking to the Sylphs, it's because the Sylphs don't mind, and it makes it much easier to talk to them. To an Eorzean, most names ending in XIO sound more male, whereas most names ending in XIA sound more female. So Eorzeans generally use female pronouns for late blooms and male pronouns for ever blooms. But this is not a rule, and either or will work for any Sylph. For example, this late bloom, Volxia, is being referred to as a male in this fate. And well, that's it. Really not much to their naming conventions. It's as free and lawless as their culture. Next, we'll look at the other whimsical creature that resides within the Twelves Wood. Another tiny floating beast tribe, but this time one covered in fur. Yes, next we'll talk about the Moogles. But for now, goodbye my friends, and have a great day.